Thanks for inviting me here. It's great. It's not very far. My wife and I drove over. We live in Pittsburgh, so it's just a few hours away. And it's a great theater, and it's a terrific event. And thanks everybody for coming out. And I'll be sitting around later for autographs or whatever. And I figure I'd just open things up to questions and answers. I can't see very well, so holler out. I don't know if I can, with these lights, if I can see raised hands clearly, but yeah.
George,
Yeah.
How did you go around for Dawn of the Dead? How did you get access to that mall for the movie? And are you going to be doing more remakes of your movies, which are excellent, by the way? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Actually, we knew the developers that owned that mall. And the mall is what gave me the idea for the second film. After Night of the Living Dead, I resisted for a while making another one. And then I got this conceit that it would be kind of cool to make one that had a different personality altogether and maybe reflected the decade a little. The decade that it was made in. The first one was dark in the 60s, 1968, and the riots happening and everything. The anger was there in that film. And Dawn of the Dead is a lot more gleeful, a lot more comic book, EC kind of comic book style. And I didn't know what to do with it, and I met these people that owned the mall, and they said, we have these crawl spaces up top and there actually is civil defense, there are civil defense supplies in there, survival kits and all that. And he took me on a little tour, and that gave me the idea that the mall came first. Then we had to figure out whether they would let us use it, and eventually they were stupid enough to let us use it. And it was Dario Argento actually was really the motivating force behind that film. I mean, he and his partners put up the first half of the money for it, and that enabled us to raise the rest of the money here in the United States.
Bless the mark. What about the sequels that you're remaking?
Well, I have a script for a fourth film, and I'm really hoping like hell to get it made. It's a problem these days because there are no small distribution companies that haven't been bought, by a studio or by the mouse or by somebody, and so nobody wants to take those risks. So I'm probably going to wind up having to make two versions of it, and maybe if we make it at all, if we can raise the money for it, you guys probably won't see the real film until video. But that's just the way it is. There are no more small distribution companies that are willing to put a film out unrated and really take a gamble on it. European markets, Japan, places like that, we can probably release the original version of it. So it's a trade-off, but at least I'll get to shoot it, and hopefully someday you guys will get to see it. Yeah.
You come from a commercial background, so I was just wondering, did you start in commercials, now you're thinking about making features? Can you talk about the transitions from commercials to features?
Well, I was always interested and really passionate about films. And the closest that we could get to it was we had a little company in Pittsburgh to do commercials and industrial films, things like that. And we made some money over the first 3 or 4 years, and were able to get some equipment together, some audio equipment and cameras, lights, all the stuff that you need. But in those days when I was in college, I grew up in the Bronx in New York and went to, somebody over here. And went to Pittsburgh to go to school, and I'm still there, much to their disappointment, probably. But in those days, when I was in school, You know, it was pre-videotape, and everything was on film. The news was on film. And cities the size of Pittsburgh and no doubt Columbus here too had film labs because that's how you did the news. So I used to go down and hang out at the film labs and watch the guys and learned how to edit and how to use the materials. And my first job was bicycling newsreels around to the TV stations. And that's how I learned to use the stuff. And we started from there, a little company, started with just 16 millimeter equipment and then graduated to 35. And you know, we were sort of it was a new idea to do commercials on film. And so that's how we got started. We always wanted to make a feature film. And you know, probably all of us had that goal in mind, but we didn't know exactly what or how or anything. And even when we made the film, we made we made a lot of costly mistakes. Our title for the film was Night of the Flesh Eaters. And we had, on the title card of the film, we put the little copyright bug on the title card. And when the distributor changed the title, Night of the Living Dead was their title. And when they changed the title, the copyright bug went off. And so the film has never been under copyright. And it took like 3 years for people to realize that, and then pretty soon it started showing up at Walgreens, you know. And so that's the one that got away. But you know, at the same time, it's brought most of the people that worked on that film are still working professionals, and you know, we've all gotten careers out of it, so can't cry too much over it. But I'm sorry, the second part of your question was how did we make the transition? We just did it, you know. 10 of us kicked in $600 to start buying film stock and rent the farmhouse, and we were still writing it as we were going along, and we were running back into Pittsburgh and shooting beer commercials, and then running back up to Evan City and shooting a few minutes of the film. And because of that, it took us, I think we only shot 30-some days, but that was spread out over 8 or 9 months. So it was, you know, we were just lucky that, you know, all the actors stayed healthy and we were able to get away with it. But it was just tenacity. I mean, we were just determined to do it. And, you know, we were never able to raise any sort of traditional money on the script because everybody said it's too dark, it's too, you know, too this, too that. And so we just went ahead and did it. And, you know, it was expensive, even though compared to what people spend on movies these days, it was bupkis, you know. I mean, it cost us about $70,000 in cash, and then when we paid off all the debts that people that, you know, suppliers that hadn't been paid over the course of the production, I think the total was about 114 grand. But these days, you can do things, you know, with video, you can do things a hell of a lot cheaper. And I always suggest to anybody that's interested in wanting to get up and try to make films is to do what we did. Just somehow get out there and you know, beg, borrow, and steal and go get something made. It's really the best advice that I can offer. Yeah. Yeah.
Was Martin really a vampire, and you won't tell us why?
Now, in my mind, Martin is not a vampire. He's a mixed-up kid.
What inspired you to make him just a mixed-up kid?
Huh? Well, that was really my idea from the jump, that he wasn't, that he was just plagued with the, you know, this family history, and, you know, which is probably what made him a little bit nuts. And the memories, in my mind, the flashback things that he sees are probably old movies or, you know, or a combination of things. But in my mind, he was never really a vampire.
Just lost a really big bet.
Huh? Oh, you did? I'm sorry, is the guy here? I'll change my story if he's not.
Yeah, he's right over there. Back up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there an alternate ending to Dawn of the Dead, or is that all bull?
No, there was an alternate ending, and we actually shot some film footage, but it required a special effect.
Suicide, right?
Suicide. But all we did was we took the shot of Fran standing outside the helicopter and, you know, standing up into the, theoretically into the blade, but we never did the effects work on it.
You are God, by the way.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I really don't want to be. Can I turn that over to somebody? Yeah.
You had done a number of collaborations with Stephen King, either directly with Creepshow or,
Right.
I don't know if directly with Dark Half, but based
Yeah.
on the story. Are there any other future collaborations with Steve?
I'm working with Steve King right now on a novel of his called The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon.
Oh, really?
But I can't get him on the phone since the other night at Yankee Stadium, so... Steve just bought a piece of the Red Sox a few months ago, by the way, so that's why.
If he's a suicide, we'll understand.
I'm sorry?
If he's a suicide, we'll understand.
Right? Yeah.
I really liked the work you did on Creepshow. Like, I really love comics, and especially the Warner Brothers DC comics.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering, were you a big fan of those, and how do you those inspire your work? Or...
Oh man, I grew up on EC comic books, and that was really, and so did Steve, and that's how that project came into being. You know, because we both loved it, and we just sat around, you know, we just sat around bullshitting, and Steve said, "Why don't we do a comic book movie?" And he had a couple of stories that were already published, and then he wrote gee, I forget which. A couple of those were originals for the film. The one he was in, Geordie Darrell, was that an original? I think it was. I think that was an original. It's hard to remember. 'Cause he did the screenplay on the first film, and so you know I don't remember which ones were previously published and which weren't. But I loved that. I grew up on that stuff, and I loved doing it. And I thought I loved the idea. I wish if we had a little more money, I think we might have been able to, you know, just pull it off a little more elegantly.
Tell them to buy less swimming pools.
Yeah. Who? Oh, it wasn't his fault. It was the producer, or the financing company. But I wish we had some of the other artists, for example. I thought there were artists that were better than Dan, you know, but yeah.
What took you away from the possibility of directing Creepshow 2? Was it just wanting to do the script and that was it, or were you doing something else at the time? Or?
Yeah, you know, I don't even remember that actually. I think that I wasn't really excited about doing it, and I was afraid that there wasn't going to be enough money, and you know, I just thought I sort of had done it before. So, but Steve asked me to do the screenplay, and I said, sure, I'm happy to do that. And you know, I was trying to get some other stuff going at the same time. And that's what you spend your life doing, is trying to get stuff going. And it's hard. It's very hard for, you know, because again, the independents are gone. I've worked with studios 4 times, and it's a nightmare. You know, changing endings and all the stuff that you hear about really happens, and so it's a pretty frustrating experience. But it's hard now that there are none of these entrepreneurial companies around that that have enough money to make a small film and get it out there. So, and a studio looks at a film, even if you say I can make this for $3 million, they say yeah, but it's going to cost me $25 million to print it and distribute it. So there's no such thing as a small film with those guys, and it's hard. Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for the movie Night Riders. I don't know if it was Universal was going to release it. If you cut the film, cut the running time.
Yeah, I didn't do that.
I know. Thanks for sticking to the original.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for liking it. Night Riders is one of my favorites because it's a very personal film, and it's very hard to say what people say. Well, what's your favorite film? And I can't make a judgment as to which is a better film. What goes into making it, the experience of making it, and whether or not the execution is. Whether or not I was able to get close to what my original idea was or what was originally on paper. and also just the experience of making it, and the cast, and the company of people that worked on it. And that was just a great company of people, and most of us have remained friends ever since. And it was a great time making that film. Yeah.
How does it make you feel when you see so many popular movies that are obviously based or almost ripped off from your work, getting studio financing, like the remake of Dawn of the Dead and 28 Days Later, Resident Evil, and yet you can't get your money to make your own film?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a disappointment, but those films are what they are. Dawn of the Dead I have nothing to do with the remake. My ex-partner is doing it, and he had the right. When I left the company, the right stayed with the company, so he had the right to do it. I didn't think it was a good idea. I think the times are different now. I just don't know what it's going to be like. I worked on Resident Evil for about a year, and they just didn't like the stuff that I did. But again, it's a German company, and the guy that runs the company literally is the kind of guy that changes the toilet paper. I mean, he makes the decisions all on his own. And this is a guy that, this guy made Das Boot. He's never played a video game. He has no idea what it's about. He just bought it because he heard it was popular. So, I was trying to stay close to the spirit of the game, and actually Capcom had given us some materials from the upcoming game so that we could use some of that stuff. And Capcom dug it, and I really liked it, and the executives at Constantine liked it, but when this guy got his hands on it, he said, no, this is not what this should be. So that was it. I was out of there. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry for?
I just want to know where the idea for the zombie Bob.
Bud.
Yes, Bob for Dave.
My man. Well, I was working on the idea of them actually getting smarter, that if you're going to teach these people or give them information, information, and try to bring them along, that eventually they're going to be more of a challenge. And that's really what it was about. And I just thought that he was, sort of the perfect kind of Frankenstein character, sympathetic, just sort of awakening to what was happening around him. And with remnants of memory, and even certain remnants of justice, and concepts in his head. And I just thought it had to go that way. And in the fourth film, there's a few more of those boys. Yeah.
Well, again, I'm going back to the dark half. I know that the movie was filmed 1 year, but it was like 2 or 3 years before it was released. What was the holdup on that?
Well, the holdup on the dark half was that Orion was the studio, and they basically were in the process of going bankrupt at the time. And so they shut everything down. They shut all their productions down. And, and stacked them on the shelf and figured out which ones to release when. And when they did release it, they didn't really release it with any kind of a good campaign, or, they were just out of money. So that's what happened to all of those Orion films. They kept dribbling out over about a year and a half. Yeah.
How did you end up in Silence of the Lambs?
Jonathan Demme's an old friend, and they shot that in Pittsburgh. A lot of people don't realize that they shot Silence of the Lambs in Pittsburgh.
You just showed up?
Hmm?
Did you just show up and they found you?
No, he called me up. He said, come on over here. So I went over. I stood around 2 days to just, 2 seconds of film. It's like Find Waldo, But it was great. It was great watching them work. It was great watching Tak, the DP on that film, is wonderful. It was great watching Jonathan work and the actors, of course.
What was your collaboration with Dario Argento like?
Dario's a wild man. I mean, he's just, he's great. I mean, I think that, if anybody knows how to shoot dreams, it's him. I mean, his early stuff, when he had some money to work with, and when he was able to do things really the way he wanted to do them, I thought some of those films are sensational. And he's great. He's a great friend. I mean, he's a difficult guy to work with. I don't say this in a bad way. We did one film together, even though they were separate. But we did a film called Two Evil Eyes, which was two Poe short stories. And basically, his production was separate from mine, so I didn't have to work on the set with him. But Savini and a lot of my buddies did, and I would hang around there. And he's just, he's a very impulsive director. And again, I don't say this in a bad way. I mean, I wish that he had the resources to be able to, do things the way he wanted to do them. But it's very hard today because time is money, and he likes to think about it and, get an inspiration and, sort of time out. Let me figure out how to shoot this. And that just doesn't work anymore. But he's great. He's great. I'm actually driving down from here to Knoxville. His daughter is acting and directing a film in Knoxville right now. Asia. Yeah.
I didn't realize you were in Silence of the Lambs. Where are you?
Well, that's why I say it's find well, though. It's your problem. I was a scene where we had to drag Jodie Foster away from the cell after the speech about the moths.
Oh.
But it was great fun, as I say, watching them work. It was great being on the set, and that was terrific. But it's they didn't even give me anything to say. I did touch Jodie Foster, by someone said. Yeah.
I have a question regarding new footage that John Russo shot for the
Yeah. What was the question?
Just what you thought of that.
I don't know, man. It's a big,
That's your answer.
That's it.
I didn't like it either, so.
Jack's a friend of mine, and so I promised him that I wouldn't come down too hard on it. But I just thought it was like, give me a break,
What about Children of the Living Dead?
I had nothing to do with it, and I'm happy to keep it that way.
Matrix Tom Savini.
I'm glad you answered that way, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the late 60s when As the Living Dead first came out, I read an article in Reader's Digest, and the author, he really was pretty negative about it, saying that it was kind of ushered in some kind of new form of horror that was really grotesque and everything. I was wondering what your reaction to that was, and if there were other reactions like that to the film.
Well, there were a lot of very negative reactions initially to the film, but it was mostly, most of it came from, there was no rating system in those days. And Night of the Living Dead was one of the films that people pointed at and said, see, this is why we need a rating system. And, you look at it now and I think it's, pretty benign, but the guy that wrote that article, which was one of the big, really pleading articles for some sort of, control by the industry. But the guy that wrote that article was reprinted from the Chicago Sun-Times, and that was Roger Ebert that wrote that.
String him up! I'm on Chicago now.
Then he went on to write, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
Quality, decent I'm Steve.
Yeah.
It was cool to see some of the trailers of some of your favorite films, but what are the films or filmmakers that you're really enjoying nowadays? More recent stuff.
Oh boy, I don't know. It's tough. There's not a lot out there, and I don't know. There's certainly no classics. I mean, I don't know. I didn't like Chicago. I liked The Hours. I thought The Hours was a good film. Horror stuff, I don't know. There's just not a lot happening. I mean, it's all either tongue-in-cheek or, I don't know. I liked Signs. I don't know if you can really call that a horror film. I like The Others. But I don't know. I'm sorry? No, I didn't. I didn't. I don't. Yeah.
If you see Cabin Fever, the ending is completely ripped off of Night of the Living Dead, like to a T.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Hi.
Well, I had a friend out there ask me, as a director, towards your actors, how much leeway do you give them? Do you rule with an iron fist, or do you allow them to do a lot of their own interpretation?
Oh, I like a collaborative set across the board. I don't like being tyrannical. I just don't think it pays dividends, you know. And I love working with people, and everybody's got a job to do in a certain way of doing it. And I think the best way to get a performance out of an actor, particularly, is to make them feel comfortable. The toughest time I had was with Tim Hutton on Dark Half, and because he's really a method guy, and but he had wonderful, wonderful ideas. I mean, and it really just sort of came down to making him comfortable enough to, cut loose. And I thought that his performance as Stark was, maybe the best thing Tim's ever done. And I thought he did a great job with that. But it's really about, just sort of talking about it. And, some people come in with a chip on their shoulder, which, frankly, Tim did in the beginning of that production. I mean, he said, wait a minute, I'm playing 2 guys. I want 2 hotel rooms. I want 2 trailers. God's truth. And the studio gave it to him. And, it was a power play. So, what you have to do is just sort of, develop a relationship and try to get rid of all that garbage, Yeah.
First of all, one of my favorite roles of you, just as one of your cameos, is the priest in Martin. Just to see you smoking and it's just funny, it's great. But I was curious if there's ever going to be a chance where you work with maybe John Amplis or Warner Shook or any of the old,
No, I see those guys a lot, but they're all doing their own thing. Warner's a very successful stage director now and doesn't have a lot of time. John is teaching. He lives in Pittsburgh. I see him a lot. And we almost worked together on a stage production recently that I was going to direct a Macbeth, and Savini was going to do the effects. And Lady Macbeth was not going to die off stage, let me put it. But we see each other a lot, and I see Tom all the time. But we always hope to work together. It's whoever gets a job. Invite the other guys over if they can do it. Great. Yeah.
I was watching a Bravo thing on 20th Century Great Horror Movies. Of course, they brought up Night of the Living Dead, and they were talking emphatically about the race card. How important did you want to play the race card versus how strong did it come through?
Well, I think that Dwayne was the best actor from among our circle of friends. So it was sort of an accident that, initially, that was not a racial statement initially to have Dwayne play that role. Now, we were all aware, and we resisted, changing the script to focus on that. And I'm not sure, I was talking to someone outside before and saying, I'm not sure that was right. I think maybe we should have focused on it a little bit. I just am not sure.
At the end, when they shoot him in cold blood, they always talk about how great his racial statement was. Was that something that was, irregardless if he's white or black, or did it actually have to focus? Did you consciously make that decision?
Well, that moment, I don't think has anything to do with race at all. They can't see him. They think at that point, they think he's a zombie. I think that's the stuff inside the house and the relationships inside the house that we might have been able to, we maybe should have said something about it. I'm not sure that it was right to just let it go as though there was nothing there. But then I stuck with it, I like the idea of in the second 2 films I just stuck with African American protagonists. Yeah.
What's your next film? What other projects?
I'm sorry.
What's your next film? What other projects can you look forward to?
I'm sorry, I still didn't hear you. Next film, what?
What's your next film? What other projects can you look forward to?
Oh, well, I'm working on this Tom Gordon with Steve. And I'm doing it actually for ABC television. I don't know if I'm doing a Dracula, which is it's a movie, you know, sort of an event movie, and it's trying to do it, you know, as close to Stoker as possible. But you never know. You never know if these things are actually going to get done. I mean, you know, what happens is most often you get paid to write a script, and they start developing a thing, and you never know. The Van Helsing Chronicles, a big film for next spring, and that could kill this project. You just don't know. So you hope for the best. And I'm working with Richard Hartley, the composer of Rocky Horror. And we have a thing called Diamond Dead, which is about a dead rock band. And I'm really hoping for that one. So that one's in the works, and the script's ready, and we're, you know, again, we're just trying to get financing for all three of them. Yes. You don't have to stand up. You keep standing up. This ain't school. Come on.
It makes it easier to hear.
Okay.
Well, considering the popularity of Return of the Living Dead, what is your attitude towards it, since it obviously usurps your prior trilogy?
I don't know. It doesn't do anything to my trilogy. You know, Steve King. Everybody asks Steve King, how do you feel about people ruining your books? And he points to the bookshelf and says, they don't look ruined to me. They're still right here. So, you know, I guess I feel, you know, everybody can. People want to try to do it, fine. I just have a sort of a certain approach to it with maybe a little more, you know, socio-political satire, and you know, everybody has a style. So I don't feel affected by it in that sense. Sometimes I get pissed off saying, how come that guy got to make a movie and I didn't? But you know, it's just natural. Yeah.
The Dead movies, like Dead, Living Dead, and all those, are really, like, they're very smart movies, but at the same time, they're incredibly violent and boring in ways that make most critics discount them. So I was wondering, why did you gravitate towards this genre for your films that are, like, they're really smart, but most people don't take them seriously because of the way they're presented. So why did you choose to present them that way?
Well, a lot of people do take them seriously. I mean, in fact, sometimes too much. I mean, I can show you treatises written about these films which go into, you know, just too much depth, I think. There's a kind of a surface satire in the films. As far as the gore, I wouldn't want to do without it. You know, it's again, it's a throwback maybe to EC, but it reminds me a little bit of. See, in my mind, it makes you take it a little more seriously. It's sort of like the operating room scenes in MASH, you know, where you're laughing your ass off for 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden there's this cut into the operating room, and blood is squirting out of the neck, and all of a sudden it makes you say, oops, I should think about this a little bit. And in my mind, that it has a sort of a grounding effect on the films. So, you know, it's a personal decision, and it's just the way I like to have it that way. Yeah.
I was just wondering, you know, you sit there and you listen to all the different movies that are blatantly taken from yours. How does it really feel to know that no matter what, they had to come to you to get the idea?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't think that way. And you certainly don't think, you know, we were a bunch of guys that got together and made a film. It's impossible for me to think of you know, sort of fathering a genre or being you know, an inspiration or whatever. I mean, I'm still out there trying to get gigs of my own. So I just don't think of it that way.
But you blatantly did. I mean, look at all the movies that have come out that you look right at that movie, oh, I literally didn't start about. You know, I mean, you just can't say, nope, I didn't have anything to do with it.
Well,
it wasn't for you to not have what you got today. Thank you very much for
well, thank you. Thank you. And it is, yeah, I mean, it's great to have them there, and it's great to, sort of, you think, gee, these are important enough that somebody's imitating them. But I don't know, I just can't dwell on that stuff at all. I'm just trying to move ahead and do the next one like that. But thank you for saying those things. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey.
I have a question. Over your 30-year run of filmmaking, if you were to look back now and compare yourself from your point you made that really dead and how you work now, how have your approaches to the craft changed? And what are some of the most important things you've learned over the last 30 years?
Well, I guess the most important thing I've learned over the time is that you're never done learning, And you can't sketch. I mean, it's a medium, it's still a very expensive medium. I'm in a position where contracts that I get, I'm not allowed to just go out and shoot on a shoestring video. The contract usually says it has to be 35, it has to be an international laboratory, boom. So it's a very expensive medium, and it's pretty hard to sketch. You don't get a chance to do a sketchbook. So really what I've tried to do is just watch a lot of film and learn as much as possible about all the different aspects, all the different specialties that go into the process. And again, for people that are interested in getting involved in filmmaking, it's good to know as much as you can about what everybody's job is, because then you'll have not only an understanding for what they're going through, but they won't be able to rip you off. They'll say, well, I gotta have a bigger light, or I need more time. But that's an important thing to learn. And it's just getting more and more comfortable with the medium and figuring out, what makes the eye move, and from shot to shot, across an edit, what feels better. And, it's really just getting comfortable with it. It's like, I don't know, it's like wearing in a pair of shoes or something. And I think gradually, I feel as though my sort of craftsmanship is improving, but, the bottom line is you get an idea, and the film is as strong or as weak as the idea, so. And craftsmanship maybe shouldn't mean as much to me, but it's I don't know. It's one of my ways of measuring, my abilities. Yeah.
When did you first see Night of the Living Bread? What was your thoughts?
He sent it to me, I think. Was it? I thought it was a gas. I just thought it was great. It's a riot. It's really fun. It's terrific, man. I can give you guys a lot of applause for doing it. It's pretty ballsy. It's great. It's a riot. It's actually the first time I've seen it on a screen, big screen. Yeah.
What do you think of jumping and running zombies? Are they zombies or are they more demons? The new Dawn of the Dead trailer has the zombies jumping and running. Yeah, that's not zombies.
Oh, you mean there's a trailer out already?
Yeah, they just put it up.
Oh, really? I don't know. Maybe they're ninja zombies. I haven't seen the trailer, and give me a break. I'm not. They shouldn't speak. They shouldn't jump. They shouldn't. They're dead. They're all messed up.
Did you have to take over the remake of Night of the Living Dead at the end? Were you behind schedule?
Yeah, well, it wasn't so much that we were behind schedule. It was that the company stopped sending checks. And I didn't really take over. I helped out with some of the big staging on some of the big shots. But Tom was there right to the end. It was not anything like that. It was a terrible situation. It was a company called 21st Century, and they were in trouble too, financially, at the time. And the checks just stopped coming in. So on the money that we had in the bank, we wound up, where we should have had 10 days left to shoot, we wound up with just 3 or 4 days left to shoot.
Did you make money off that movie? Did it do well?
No. No, there's never a back end. Profits, man, unless you have some ownership in a film, profits just never seem to materialize. People think you get rich. No, you get your paycheck, you get your salary, and profits rarely materialize into anything. I mean, I have a small percentage on Dawn of the Dead, which is probably the most profitable film, but most of those profits stay with the company, and I basically get like a royalty, 6% royalty. Yeah.
Are you aware of the Japanese Dawn of the Dead figures? And if so, did you get any paychecks from that?
No. He's asking about the Japanese action figures for Dawn. No, somebody just did that. I know Richard Rubenstein, I think, is chasing after him now. But what are you going to do? You can't do anything about it.
We got one in our bag.
That's all. I don't care. I ain't Richard. I'm not Richard.
You'll still sign it, right?
I'll sign it. I don't care about that stuff. My feeling is, hey, whatever keeps it alive, is cool with me. I suppose, I get upset about piracy issues. I do get upset about that because that can have an effect. But I'm not as upset as a lot of these bleeding hearts, because the fact is the profits are never there anyway. And, or at least you don't see them. It's like the old story with Coming to America with the 300 million, and they hadn't quite gotten into profit yet. It's a joke. Yeah.
The changing of horror movies, the great horror movies that come out like Ring, Ginger Snaps, the remake Legend of Hell House, etc., etc. What were your original directors that inspired you versus modern directors which might influence you still?
Well, I was a big fan of, actually, my favorite, the guys that filmmakers that I really liked the best were Orson Welles and a guy named Michael Powell, who did Peeping Tom, Tales of Hoffman. Tales of Hoffman actually is not a horror film, but it has fantasy elements in it, and it's the film that really made me want to make movies, and it's just this wonderful example of sort of guts guerrilla filmmaking and a very bold idea. It's basically a music video. They took an opera and added a couple of ballet numbers on it, and it's a fantasy story, or it's actually 3 stories with a wraparound. And Michael Powell, I just thought he was a genius. He really knew how to tell a story. And I thought Wells was probably the best stylist ever. So those were the guys that I cared about. I didn't, when I was watching their horror films early on, man, I wasn't reading credits. So I don't think that I wasn't inspired, or I wasn't tracking anybody on the radar, or thinking in terms of, gee, this guy's got to go see this guy's next movie. I was not. I was just going down to see the movie, So, yeah.
Have you heard of a board game called Maul, M-A-U-L of America? It's basically a zombie spin-off of Dawn of the Dead board game. Where you run around and just waste hundreds of zombies.
I haven't heard of it.
Is there a place we can send you a copy? A friend of mine produced that game, and it's really funny, and it follows along the lines of Dawn of the Dead, basically.
It's a video game?
Yeah, it's a board game.
A board game.
Charlie Rogers game called Mall of America.
Oh, wow.
And you just run around and
Great.
kill hundreds of zombies, and each player can screw other players over constantly throughout the game, so it's really fun.
Well, great. I guess they could send it here.
Okay, if you can get it, that's great.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, out of curiosity, are you a fan of Lucille Fulci's zombie movies?
I'm sorry.
Lucille Fulci's Italian zombie films?
Yeah.
Are you a fan of those films?
Well, we were talking about that outside too. I like. They're just sort of nightmares. They're sort of trips. It's hard to sort of make heads or tails out of them, and there's not a lot of message there, but or consciousness. But they're fun to watch. They're really pretty. They're pretty trippy. Yeah.
You said you don't have a favorite movie. You have one that you most enjoyed making? One that stands out from the others in terms of production and execution?
Yes, actually, my last film, Bruiser, was by far the most fun, and it was just across the board the best experience that I had. I also think we were really limited budget-wise, and I had to, be economic, and I really learned how to move the camera around a lot more, and the cast, I mean, everybody in that cast was just sensational, and so it's become my favorite. Two more. Yeah. Oop, yeah.
This gentleman right here could try to ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Didn't see you.
It's more about personality history. I was wondering what led you to the horror genre in the first place, and how you kind of came to your rendition of the zombie. Something about particular versions of it.
Well, as I say, I grew up on EC Comics, and I always wanted to make a horror film, even though it wasn't the first thing we tried. We tried to do a serious film first. We had a script written, and we were trying to raise money for it, and it was difficult. People would say, "Hey, well," and so I decided to switch over to horror, and I had written a short story that we wound up basing Night of the Living Dead on, the first part of that story. No, Jack Russo may have it in one of his books. I don't know, but no, it's not. I don't have it anymore. And as far as what the zombies were, when I was writing it, they were just living dead, and it was just a different spin on it. And it wasn't until I was actually writing with Jack, and we start, the idea of zombies came up, and we said this is like a new kind of zombie, because prior to that they were all, in the Caribbean, and so we said, wow, this is a kind of a, maybe a new creature. Yeah.
Being a big fan of the Stephen King books, I'm kind of curious on how you're going to tackle the zombie word. Do you think it's more important to stay true to the story, especially since you hint into most of the Stephen King movies run the books up? Going in with that, knowing that's a fear, do you think it's more important to get your spin on it and tell something more interesting than wasn't there to begin with, or to stay as true as possible to give the fans exactly what they're expecting? What do you think is more important?
Well, when you're adapting a novel, and particularly, one of Steve's, I always feel like I'm, walking on his pages a little bit, but you have to do certain things, I think, to turn it into a film. But I much prefer, particularly with Steve's stuff, to stay with the intention, stay with the author's intention, and that, that's what we're doing with this. But, no, he was on Creepshow because he was in one of them, and he was around. He just stuck around because we were having a good time. But no, the other films, he hasn't come around. I mean, he'll come visit, but that was it. He was around more on Night Riders than on Dark Half. He never showed up on Dark Half. But Steve has approval over scripts that are adapted from his novels, and we've never had any clashes that way. He's also very willing to be collaborative. He's just a good guy, and he's not like he doesn't take too much of a proprietary interest. I think I'm more concerned about preserving his intentions than he is sometimes. Okay. Yeah? What? You tell me. Okay. All right. No, I'll talk to you outside at the table there.